I would like to introduce Matt Vitale. He is going to be presenting Imposter Syndrome in Networking, Overcoming Imposter Syndrome to Further Your Network Automation Journey. Matt is a senior network automation consultant at Network to Code, and he is coming to us today from Indiana. This is Matt's first time presenting at NANUG, and it's a pleasure to have him speaking with us today. Welcome, Matt.
Oh, good, mic's on. Wonderful. Welcome. Thank you guys so much for coming to my presentation. Today's talk, it's on imposter syndrome and networking, and really overcoming imposter syndrome to further your network automation journey. As Anna said, my name's Matt Vitale. I'm a senior network automation consultant at Network to Code. There we go. So today's agenda, we'll start off with a very high-level introduction, just kind of go over a little bit of who I am. Next, we're going to kind of go through understanding imposter syndrome and what exactly it is. After that, we'll look at identifying imposter syndrome and how it can necessarily apply to us as well as maybe our peers. Followed up by different ways we can look at overcoming imposter syndrome, specifically in IT and networking fields, but also just in general. So you may be asking me, like, what are my qualifications, right? I'm no doctor, but what I am an imposter. I have no problem admitting that. In fact, I read a book once on it. This book right here, actually, The Imposter Cure by Dr. Jessamy Hibbard. I actually read it a couple of times. Great book. I did read a whole bunch of funny memes online. There's a ton of them out there, including this one from XKCD, because honestly, there's an XKCD for everything. And finally, after doing all of that and reading a book and learning about it, I realized I'm still an imposter, and a lot of other people are. So what I want to do today is not just give a talk on it, but I want to play a game. And if any of you have kids or just play games and you've played Among Us, then you know what I'm talking about. So today, we're going to play identifying and eliminating the imposter in us, all right? So we're going to start with understanding what exactly imposter syndrome is, and then we'll dive into it from there. So to get started with, I have this really great quote that I like. It says, taking on a challenge is a lot like riding a horse. If you're comfortable while doing it, you're probably doing it wrong. And this quote is from none other than the great Ted Lasso. Phenomenal show. If you haven't seen it, highly recommend that you should go see it. Okay, so let's start. What exactly is imposter syndrome, right? Well, imposter syndrome tends to be for people that are like people pleasers, right? It tends to be triggered a lot when you are doing achievement-related tasks, approval-related tasks, specifically if you're insecure about like your knowledge or your skill set, which is really exacerbated when you're transitioning to a new job or a new project. I mean, by definition, you go to a new job and everyone there knows a lot more than you about the company. You're starting out. Totally comes into play there. It also comes in when you're feeling different from your peers or your core group of partners. That is specific as well to when you're starting a new job. Same thing, you got new people you're working with. The real crux of it, or I guess the real core of it, it's really about fear, right? So imposter syndrome is all about fear. It's kind of weird to say that. So like, oh my gosh, I'm afraid of something, right? But it's the fear of being found out because you're an imposter. You don't want to be found out. It's the fear of failure. And it could be all sorts of things. I'm failing at my project. I'm failing my peers. I'm failing myself, right? It could be the fear of not being good enough just in general, of whatever it is that you're doing at or your job. Doesn't really matter. But in the end, we got to understand that this fear, right? Fear is a feeling fabricated in our mind. So it's a feeling, and the feeling is not a fact. And that's one thing we're really going to explore today. So I want to start off with this great little comic that I found. I have a boss named Ken at Network to Code. Great guy. You probably heard of him. He would always tell me, hey, Matt, can I speak to you in Zoom? And it would always be Friday at 4:30. I was joking about this earlier at lunch. Friday, 4:30, hey, let's talk on Zoom. So first thing I think to myself, all right, I'm getting fired. Absolutely. Next thing I think to myself, okay, he realized it was a mistake to hire me. I got found out. So what happens? Hey, Matt, guess what? You're doing such a great job. Like, I appreciate it, and I'm giving you more work to do. Happened all the time. So then I would get off of Zoom, say, thanks a lot, Ken, I appreciate it. And then I would start thinking to myself, all right, I have more work to do. It's how am I going to keep fooling him, right? Like, it's only a matter of time until he realizes it was a mistake to hire me. This is crazy. I can't keep this up. That happened all the time. So we're going to say this whole list right here. And we're going to imagine if someone told you any of these items on this list, right? And I probably don't know you I may not know you personally, but I probably do know you. because if you're like me as an imposter, you probably tell yourselves these things quite a lot. I did debate, like really even put in this slide on the presentation deck at all. But these last two items down here, I highlighted because I was working on this presentation a while ago, and it was Saturday morning, and I'm going through this list and going through my notes in the book, and I come across these two items. And my family they're in like the living room, they're playing a board game, and I'm on my computer and I'm stressing out about this like crazy. And I'm stressing out not because it's not done, but because I don't feel like I'm gonna be good enough up here to do it, or even just be able to do it in general, right? So this right here, it's a live action reenactment of what I did the moment I realized that and I read it, and it clicked. Yeah, so I literally shut my computer down. I kind of had to, because I realized it wasn't me not being good enough, it was the imposter in me telling me I'm never going to be good enough. I have to keep working at it. So I put this slide in as well because I recognize not everybody in here may necessarily feel this way, right? Or they may not relate, and that's totally fine. In fact, a recent study done by Blind suggested about like 10,000 respondents of them, about 58% of people do. So that means statistically, the majority of people in here do, but still like 42% is a lot, like 42% didn't. And you can even see it a lot with some of these companies up here, with like the FANG companies or some really big companies. A lot of people can relate. Doesn't mean you necessarily do, but if you're a manager, it can maybe help you understand how your direct reports or your peers are. Heck, it could even tell you, like, how does some of my management going up the chain, right? How do they feel? So I gave a similar presentation of this internally at my company, and I can't tell you how many people across the management chain absolutely could relate. Okay, so what I want to do now is break down the imposter cycle a little bit. Comes from the book, really great resource. We're going to start with the thought. The thought is, I don't really know what I'm doing. This thought leads to the feelings of discomfort and the feelings of anxiety, okay? When we start feeling these things and we start thinking those things, the next thought that tends to come is, I'm an imposter. When you say, I'm an imposter, you self-doubt. You start doubting yourself and you start having that fear. You have that fear of failure. After that, you start going into negative self-talk. It all kind of gets wrapped up into this, right? After negative self-talk, you look at a drive for perfection. Perfection is unattainable, but we're driving for it because we don't feel like we're good enough, okay? From there, you're looking at overworking or avoidance. Overworking is my example from Saturday morning, right? I'm working too much and I don't need to. Avoidance is procrastinating it and putting it off because you're afraid of doing it, or afraid of, really more like afraid of failing at doing it, not necessarily doing it itself. There we go. Success. Now, inevitably, you have success. And I know this because you're here and your company paid some money to send you here, right? So you have success, you do your job well, but it really doesn't matter because we discount the success. And there's a whole list of reasons we're going to go through on that, but it doesn't matter the success, we discount it. And from there, we just continue the cycle. So let's break it down a little bit, all right? What happened? All right. So we look at the first two items here. Perfect. We start with looking at, I don't really know what I'm doing, and discomfort, okay? We address those, and we really have to understand that these will lead to feelings of dread. It starts taking success of what we want it to be, and it leads it to being success is not what we want anymore. We're like afraid of it, we dread it. So when you take a little bit of discomfort and a little bit of anxiety, right, they're looking in on the windows, and what do you get? You get your imposter self, right? You get Macaulay Culkin, and he's like afraid out of his mind. All right. Perfect. So next slide. So what we want to do to try to start breaking out of this imposter cycle is we want to look at the first two items right here and we want to flip them. We want to start recognizing that discomfort is normal. Being uncomfortable, especially in challenging situations, it's normal for people. It's normal for everybody on the planet, right? So congratulations, you're human. We want to change our response to I'm not an imposter. We change the response to these feelings to instead be something more akin to questioning ourselves, questioning the feelings that we're having. Am I really an imposter? Would a normal person feel uncomfortable in this situation? Yeah, most likely, right? We look at the self-doubt and we start changing that, where instead of isolating ourselves and thinking that to ourselves, we actually ask others and we talk with others. And believe it or not, sharing it, you'll find there's a lot of people that can relate. I found people already today in lunch that can relate, and it really kind of helps you break out of that cycle. And once we start doing that, it breaks that cycle down and we can start rebuilding it. So the next step that we want to look at is positive self-talk. Now it's hard, and I don't believe it right away, but I practice it because the more I do it, the more I'll believe it. Success. We take on success because it's real, and we actually start believing it, or at least we try to, right? We embrace that success. We learn from our mistakes because I'm going to make mistakes, I'm going to have difficulties, but how else am I going to grow? We take on board our successes and we actually acknowledge them for what they are. Our successes are real, they're authentic, and they're earned. And we actually deserve them. We have to actually believe that. We have a sense of satisfaction over what we've done, and we keep that and we embrace it and we actually hold on to that. And then finally, it increases our self-esteem, which inevitably, when we start feeling this way again in an uncomfortable situation, the cycle can continue and our self-esteem will kind of help break out of that imposter cycle and maintain this healthy way of looking at it. I found this great quote online on Twitter. Adam Grant, he's an author, read one of his books before as well. He says, imposter syndrome is, I don't know what I'm doing. It's only a matter of time until everybody finds out. Okay? Growth mindset is, I don't know what I'm doing yet. It's only a matter of time until I figure it out. And the highest form of self-confidence is believing in your ability to learn. It's very applicable. Okay. One of the key parts in here I mentioned earlier is discomfort, right? It's really key. It's the response to how we perceive discomfort and how we experience it. That's really the key entry point into it. It's not us, and it's not us feeling that way, right? Everybody's going to feel that way. It's our interpretation of that feeling of discomfort, which leads to feeling like an imposter. We have to recognize it's a normal reaction to any challenge, any change, anything hard, including public speaking, right? It's just what it is. Everybody's going to be nervous, but it doesn't matter because we are not an imposter. It doesn't necessarily mean I feel uncomfortable. I'm not sure how to do this, so I'm an imposter. That's not what it means. And it does not mean that you don't know what you're doing. It's not at all what it means. So we went through understanding imposter syndrome, a little bit of the background of it. Now let's look at identifying imposter syndrome. So we're going to start, there's really 5 different types of imposter syndrome that I found. So the first one that we want to look at is superhero, okay? Superheroes are those people that really overwork themselves because of how inadequate they feel, and they got to keep working and working. Like, that's me on Saturday morning, like hands down. We look at natural genius. These are people who set really, really high goals for themselves, unattainable goals, perfectionism, like driving for that, but then they get crushed when they can't meet them because it's not possible. We look at expert. These people are never satisfied with the current level of knowledge. Now, it's good to learn and it's good to grow, but it's your fear of never knowing enough and if your fear of being an imposter driving your knowledge. That's what it kind of gets into that gray area, right? The perfectionist. So these people focus on your mistakes and ignore any successes you have. So it doesn't matter what you accomplish. You can make a typo or a small little bug that no one notices, and that's what you focus on, and that's why you realize it wasn't a real success that you earned. Finally, a soloist. These are people who want to work alone, and that is more driven by the fear of being found out as an imposter. Now, good to be an introvert. Well, if you want to be, right? Introverts are fine, extroverts are fine. It's the fear of being found out as an imposter that drives you to work alone. That's where the issue comes into play. My 2 specifically, when I read this book, like it just hit me like a sack of bricks, right? Superhero and perfectionist, absolutely can relate to that. Superhero, I told you Saturday morning, natural genius is a close third for me as well. Now, honestly, I can find all 5 parts of these really in me, like definitely see that. But those 2 kind of really hit home for me when I read them. Okay, some myths about imposter syndrome. It makes me work hard. These are things I tell myself all the time, and I believe them. And when I read them in the book, I couldn't believe that this was part of imposter syndrome. I just believe them to be facts. It kept me humble. It means I aim for higher standard. It motivates me. It's better to be modest than arrogant. And it keeps me in check. What I learned is that all these things do is they increase my anxiety, they increase my self-doubt, and they lower my self-esteem. And what I don't need is these things to do a good job. I do a good job. I can work really hard. I do work really hard, and I can do a good job. I can do them all without this and without those negative feelings. So we kind of push those aside and start working on that. So reasons for downplaying successes. I love this one because I've told myself these way too much and I've believed them so much to be true. For example, it was lucky or it was a fluke. I'm a good actor. I'm really good at acting. I guess, never took an acting class. I fooled them. And we can go on with the list. We can go on with the list. We can even say, hey, this is why I got a job. I'm just good at interviewing. And I fooled them and I tricked them. We can even go and look at academic reasons. Why did I get a cert? Why did I get a degree? Doesn't matter. There's always a reason why the successes we keep getting are never actually earned. We always have a reason for it. Confirmation bias is very real with people in general, right? But it's definitely real with us imposters. So what we do is we seek out information that confirms what we already believe. And what we already believe is we know for a fact that we're an imposter. And we keep fooling people, and we just got to keep on working so hard so nobody can find out, right? We are determined to prove them wrong. We take any positive info that we may get, any praise, anything like that, and we kind of dismiss it and we explain it away and identify any minor mistakes like that perfectionist. Wherever or however negative information comes in, boom, I accept it as fact. Doesn't matter what it is, even if it's relevant, I accept it. Constructive criticism can still be taken on in a negative manner. This comic here from Calvin and Hobbes. Hobbes says denial springs eternal. Calvin says it's not denial, I'm just very selective about the reality that I accept. Thought it was very applicable. Okay, so before we looked at the imposter syndrome cycle, now we're going to look at the confirmation bias cycle, a little bit shorter this time. Entry point starts with doing something well. Whatever it is, you do something well, that moves on to ignoring positive feedback and praise. We ignore that because now we take on the mistakes and we magnify them, make them way bigger out of proportion. We tell ourselves, hey, I fooled them. How am I going to keep this up? How am I possibly going to keep fooling them over and over? They're only going to find out eventually. And from here, it continues on because when you do something well again, which you will, it goes back into that cycle. Last section, overcoming imposter syndrome. We've looked at different ways of understanding kind of what it is. We looked at different ways of identifying it or really even seeing it in our peers. Now let's look at finding it and then let's eliminate it, just like in Among Us. We want to eliminate it within ourselves. There are 9 different ways to cope, and it really should be titled 9 Ways to Learn to Cope with Imposter Syndrome because it's a learning process and it's a journey. It takes a while. First one, know the signs. We went through that in the first 2 sections. Second one, knowing you're not alone. I can't stress enough how important it is to find someone else that you can relate to or even just talk to, right? It really, really helps. Distinguishing humility and fear for what they are. They're feelings, they're not facts. They don't necessarily mean you're an imposter. Letting go of perfectionism and recognizing it's unattainable. Being kind to ourselves and at least practicing and starting that. Tracking your successes, which we're going to go through here in a little bit. Talking with your mentor or manager, again, kind of the sharing part, but even if you don't have a mentor or manager to talk to, find a friend. Saying yes to opportunities. I don't like this one because it hurts, because I've turned down opportunities and I've left places because, I'm an imposter. Embracing the feeling. Embracing the feelings that discomfort is normal. Everybody feels that, right? Understanding it for what it is. We take the voice inside of us, criticism versus compassion. We have to start becoming aware of what we say to ourselves, okay? We look at the words and the tone. We look at whose voice is saying this. Is this me or is this the imposter talking to me? Is it actually helpful? Like, would I say this to my peer? Like, I've broken stuff in production before, right? Like, everybody, I don't know how many people haven't, but like, if my peer did it, I would never bash him. I would never say something bad or think he was horrible. We all make mistakes. But if I do it, it's different, right? We got to try to find a new voice for ourselves. Start being kind to ourselves and talk to ourselves the same way I'm going to talk to my peer when he takes down a core router. We have to accept ourselves for the flaws and the successes and have faith in ourselves that we can grow and continue to learn. We really want to take the self-doubt and insecurity that you may feel, and we want to flip it and turn it into self-awareness and conscious reflection. Now, it's not positive self-awareness right away. It's just conscious self-awareness, being aware of when those feelings and those thoughts are present. We can convert it into positive later. We want to acknowledge our accomplishments. Now, historically, I don't like doing this. I don't like talking about my accomplishments. I don't even like talking about my friends, right? I always change the subject. I feel like I'm bragging. I got to stop hitting the mic. But Muhammad Ali once said, it's not bragging if you can back it up, because the imposter in me has no problem bringing up the negatives and reminding me of it all the time, but I hate remembering the positives, and sometimes I don't remember them. So in the book, Dr. Hibbard really talks about making this list like evidence, all right? So imagine the imposter is a prosecutor over here, and they're trying to convince a jury that you're an imposter and you're on defense in the trial. And they have all these reasons of all these negatives of why you're an imposter, and they're going to convince the jury. So what you need is hard evidence, like written down or a list or something, to present to the jury to show them. And that way, when you start feeling that way, you kind of have things to go back to and add to it. So as an example from my list, here's a general list of things from my accomplishments from Network to Code in the last couple of years of being there. General accomplishments over my career, just very high level, as well as some personal ones. Now, this one, like the last one, may be pretty minor, like, okay, I lost some weight, but it's important to me, I accomplished it, so I put it on my list, and my regular list, it's like multiple pages long, you could write it down, and it's kind of like a personal resume, right? You can kind of grow with it. It's not a resume for a company, but it's a resume for me and my imposter self. Some IT career-specific tips, okay? So like find a ticket or a Git repository, find a concept you're interested in. If you go into GitHub, you can sometimes find issues that say good first issue. Great one to work on. Another one, if you can't find any, is look at documentation. It really forces you to learn the product before you actually work on it, or the documentation. You have to, okay? And everyone loves documentation. Nobody has time for documentation. But who doesn't love updated documentation? Or someone who goes and does it, right? I mean, even Obi-Wan understands the importance of updated documentation. And you can't argue with a Jedi. Next, a couple other tips, right? We want to talk about it with our friends and peers. I'm going to repeat that all day long. Study for and obtain a new cert. That can really help too, especially if it helps you feel like you solidified in your knowledge. It doesn't work for everybody. Same thing with trying something in a lab. Sometimes I'll spin up something in a lab and I'll just break it. And break it on purpose to kind of see what I did and practice breaking things and making mistakes. And that's really the key. Making a physical list of current tasks. So in addition, here's an example of a board that I had up at a previous job years ago. I wrote out a list of all my tasks on my to-do list, and I kind of used it like a swim lane, right, or a Kanban board, and I moved them over. And that really helped me. Doesn't help everybody, but it helped me out. These things, they'll help you give a sense of pride and accomplishment, favorite quote, learn something new, and you'll have a feeling of really confidence, increase your confidence and satisfaction. Relating with a peer. Here I am talking about this again. It's really, really key, right? So you can't be afraid to ask questions and find people that relate to you. You'll be surprised how many people do. When I first gave this talk internally at Network to Code, I lost track how many people messaged me privately talking about it. I can't tell you. So I say find a fake buddy, because I found a fake buddy. He started the same day as me at Network to Code 2 years ago. This is a screenshot of all the times we talked about how soon it was we're going to get fired. We're going to get found out any minute. And there's more. It's just like a clip, right? So this fake buddy, right? He has a blog that actually has words, and he's been nominated multiple times. He wrote a live Jinja 2 parser where you plug something in, it like parses something out. It's crazy. And I've used it like a lot. I was looking up something in Ansible before making this presentation. His blog's like second on the list. And this guy's an imposter, right? So his name is Prevalent. This guy works at Network to Code as well. One of the smartest guys I know. Work with him a lot. Really great guy. He helped me out a ton. And we kind of helped each other. But he was so helpful when I started a new job, which was one of those things, right? Starting a new job. So big shout out to you, Prevalent. Thank you so much. Wrapping up here with the presentation, I got another quote here for you. This one says, "Be curious, not judgmental." And I learned this one is not Walt Whitman. This is actually Ted Lasso saying it's Walt Whitman. So again, if you haven't seen the show, great show. No, I don't work for Apple TV either. So final quote to leave you here. Jen Heemstra on Twitter, she had this great quote. It says, "What imposter syndrome says to me is you don't deserve to be here. And what I've learned is to say back is, do any of us really deserve to be here? Probably not. I'm thankful for the opportunity, and I'm choosing to make the most of it." So there. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much. I don't know, are there any questions? There's one.
Do you have any advice for managers trying to help junior engineers identify and work through it?
Yeah. Kind of. It's a hard one, right?
You can do it, man. I believe in you.
Likewise. So here's my inspiration for this talk, okay? So at work, we have an app in Slack. It's called Donut. I don't know if you've heard of it. Donut, every week it randomly pairs you up with somebody new to talk to, okay? And the Donut says, so one week I'll talk to my CEO, the next I'll talk with a new hire. And I went through a streak of like 3 or 4 people I'm talking with last year, new hires, and we're talking, chit-chatting, and I kind of feel a little tension, like they're kind of nervous about starting. So I bring up these feelings that I had when I started, and like all of them can relate, and they like totally, like their mind was blown. So I did a presentation on it. That leads me to my advice. My advice is, I was surprised at how many people did feel that way, especially when starting a new job. No one talks about it, like vulnerabilities and feelings and fear. Like, who wants to talk about that, especially at work? But it's like it's pretty prevalent. So my suggestion is people were open and forthcoming about it when I started being open and forthcoming about it. You know, so even if you have like one-on-ones, you could talk about it, or different ways you can relate. Or yeah, I would just start with that. I don't know how else I would.
One of the things that I've been thinking a lot about is often we understand what they're going through better than they do, right? Because they're going through it for the first time, right?
Right.
We did it 20 years ago,
Right.
and we've had 20 years to think about it. So often just like opening the topic with them can be a real help. I'm just curious if there's more than that we can do or should. I don't mean to put you on the spot.
No, I mean, I'm literally on the spot right now.
Right.
So it's all good. The only way I found, right, and I don't manage peers, I'm at the engineer level, is just opening up and talking about it. And like some people I talk with people and they're like, yeah, I don't feel that way. This doesn't apply to me. And that's fine. They were part of the 42%, and that's fine. But I had a lot that did, and I helped them. So, I just go from there.
Thanks.
So, hey, welcome.
Hey, Matt, thank you.
Yeah.
Austin Carr, Unity Fiber. So the numbers say 1 in 5 have a mental health issue, right? And that's a wide range, right? Given that you gave this at your company, and I applaud you for that, applaud you for this whole conversation, did you guys see any impact on your overall company mental health, mental awareness, right? And I say that, so we've got 850 employees, right? 1 in 5, that means every day I'm walking down the hall, somebody's struggling with something. Just tell us a little bit about how this positively affected your company, because I'm willing to bet it did.
Oh, wow. We are a company of about 100 strong. How did it affect the company? I mean, I'm presenting today. Like, I gave this internally, and I had enough people say that they can relate, and it was like important enough to find somewhere to present it. So I'm like, all right, fine. How did it help the company overall? I think it opened up some of those conversations, like those donut conversations I said, to make them a little bit easier. This is now one of those we have, when we bring new hires in, we have like an orientation process. We've kind of added this talk to the orientation process. So now when new hires come, like, we talk to them about it, and they know that we're very like open and inclusive and diversive as a company. Like, we really strive for that at Network to Code. So by adding this in, it kind of initiates that conversation. And then I think some managers as well, they actually will talk with them directly with new hires. So I don't know how it's helped directly because I don't manage anyone, but I do know it's opened that conversation that was previously a very taboo that no one talked about. And remember I told you, like, I got so many direct messages on Slack. A lot of them also said I had no idea anyone else felt this way. A lot. I did a blog post, exact same topic, about like 4 months ago on our company blog. I had 2 people just over lunch tell me that, and they really appreciated the blog post. Now, nobody contacted me directly, but I mean, it's out there. So,
Thank you.
yeah, you're welcome. That's it, 2 and done.
I don't know are there any questions remotely from those watching the webcast? James? No. Okay. Matt, if it's any consolation, I mean, when we met, I also told you that I'm a massive imposter myself. That's why this talk resonated with me. But I also want to say that I also have a brag list.
Do you?
That's how I call it a brag list.
Yeah.
And I read it every time I have an interview for a new job, and I was unemployed last year. And I read it to hype myself up. You know what? You can do this. And I have 25 years of experience in the field, so I totally understand you.
I appreciate that. It seems weird at first to write it, but yeah, it's a good thing. It helps for sure. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Matt.
Thank you.